Hey, Stacy. Tiffany, Jennifer, Ren, Anita's on, Robin, Brandy, Brandy Williams, Hannah Sue, SC Bach, Sharon Alexander, Phyllis, Jules. Hey, guys. Barbara, Okie Girl, Martha, Meg is looking up, Annie Mac, Tammy Wright. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Donica Lynn, Scott, Mila, Michelle Moore, Tammy, Paper Dolly. Did I say Paper Dolly already? KW, Lynette, Willis, Deanna Calloway. Yep. Okay. Cool. Everybody can hear me? All right. Well, how's everybody tonight? I will not be on too long. I will be on. Hey, Tim. Timothy Gaines is in the house. Dr. Catherine, Melanie, Eva, Steel Magnolia, Tanya, Cheryl, Becky. I will not be on too long tonight because I did something really foolish today and I'm very sunburnt. So everything hurts. I have to go get some aloe vera. It's right after this. And it just hurts to even, I don't know, be still here. So Coco, Lynn Faulkner, Lori Sanders. I've got to try and catch John. I always miss John. Sky Angel, Victoria from Texas, Coco Bear, Allie Coker. Yes, I'm Sunburned Diva. Tiffany, Maria, Judith, Tinky Bear Bando, Vanessa. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I don't get out in the sun that much, but my back hurts. Everything's very, very sunburnt. All right. Well, welcome everybody tonight. Like I said, I won't be on too long. I had a few things to kind of go over, and I put some links. There'll be some links in the description for folks if they want to go check them out. We'll be talking about some different things tonight. We'll be kind of all over the map. Demetrius, hey bud. Let's see who else is here that I did not say hello to. Arnie Bragg. All right, Brandy, good. Hope you enjoy it. Richard Browder's on. What's up? Drink water. Yep. Yep. I'll be drinking water, taking vitamin D, and hey Tina. Yes, yes, Tina. That was fun. I enjoyed teaching that class. I think next Sunday, or I'm sorry, next Monday, I will. Hey Ruthie. Next Sunday, next Monday. Um, I want to talk through that lesson. I want to kind of clean it up, and I want to see if I can figure out a way to post it on here. I don't know if I can post visuals on here. I think I can. I've never done it before. Um, so yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed the Sunday school teaching. If any, for those that didn't know, I got invited to Grace Bible Church in Winchester, Kentucky, and I taught their Sunday school class there. And so we went over um, a lesson called "Running Out of Convergence," and that was pretty neat. Yeah, and so that'll be next Monday, and then I will be heading back to Texas on Friday, and I will be off the net for like 2.5 weeks or whatever. Hey, Zoe, um, Tiffany, Lisa, Caroline, sorry, Kathy, Marie. Yeah, so I'll be incognito for a couple of weeks. I will be posting stuff. I have stuff scheduled it'll just come out on its own. Hey, Just Vicky, await him. Cheryl, just country girl. Yeah, it'll stuff will just be coming out. Hey, Jennifer, and I will be, it'll just I can schedule articles and videos and things like that. I can schedule those things to come out ahead of time. I don't have to physically do those things, be there to do it. Um, so with that said, I'm not taking a whole lot of questions tonight. Probably just like 10 questions. Just get those to the moderators. And then there is a question that I want to answer for somebody that wrote me a letter. Karen from Tennessee wrote a letter, so I want to talk about that. So, if you've did your homework and read through the Ninth of Av article, you know that this article was written last year. And give me 1 second here. Yeah, so this article was written last year, and I believe um, what was it? Last year, Tish B'Av was in August. Hey, Kathleen, Vanessa, I'm trying to get this so you guys can see this. Let me find a better one to do this. All right, that's not. I want to. I want a GIF. I don't want a just an image. And you guys will see what I'm talking about here. Okay, here we go. Can I make this bigger? All right. So before we get into that article, I wanted to address a couple of things prior to this. So everybody's seen this, right? And I can't remember if this was from The Naked Gun or from Airplane the movie. Somebody could correct me on that. But basically, you've got the guy saying, "Hey, nothing to see here, people. Please disperse. Nothing to see. Nothing's going on." Right? And I feel like that's a lot of the clergy today in what's passing for Christendom. There's like all this stuff going on, for the last 2 weeks. Hey, Florida Mermaid. The last I'm not the last 2 weeks, the last few years. You have all this stuff going on, and then you've got pastors in the pulpit. They're standing there like, "Hey, nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. We're gonna be here for another 100 years. Christ isn't coming back ever." I mean, you go from 9/11 um, to the war on terror. Iraq, Afghanistan, all the different viruses and things that have come out. Um, obviously stuff from 2020 on, the riots, the push for a one world government with the Great Reset, um, the push for a global, health ID, digital currency, and still you have these pastors up here. They're like, "Hey, nothing to see here, nothing to see here," and behind them, like the whole world is like on fire and going nuts. That's exactly what that scene from that movie. Thank you for The Naked Gun. That's exactly what that scene reminds me of, right? That these pastors are up there like, "Nothing to see here, nothing to see here." Um, you know, and I've just had some people today. They're angry because I called this pastor out, and I'm like, "Look, the guy that I cited in the article, Eyes Wide Shut, like, I didn't have anything wrong with this guy's sermon up until the very last point where he just went on this tangent about prophecy." And I'm like, I mean, it just came from like it was if you listen to the sermon, it just came from like out of left field. And the only reason I even it's not like I looked up this guy's sermon and I found him and then I'm picking apart his sermon. I was sitting in the audience. Like and I was visiting out of town. This was just somebody's church, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who this guy. I didn't know anything about this church. I was just sitting there, and this guy's got a pretty good sermon. I don't disagree with it. And then all of a sudden, like just out of left field, like he just starts anti prophecy stuff, and I was like, "What is going on with this guy?" Anyways, I just wanted to kinda put that out there. I was thinking about that scene from The Naked Gun, I feel like that's a lot of pastors today. A lot of pastors are just like, "Nothing to see here, nothing to see here," and the whole world is on fire behind them, so alright, well, let's get going, let me go through this article. So I wrote this article, Tish B'Av, last year, July 15th, 2022, and it was, sort of a review of an article by a guy named Greg Lauer, and I think his website is A Little Strength, and he had an excellent article, and to be fair, I didn't know a lot about Tish B'Av prior to reading that article, so, um, just a great read. I've linked this article. If you haven't read it, I've linked Tish B'Av. It'll be linked to this, video. And then inside of that article, I'm linked to his article. So, it's his article is called "A Pattern with a Hole." And so when he goes through all the evidence that he presents, I think he makes a strong case for the rapture to occur on Tish B'Av. And so for those who aren't really familiar with Tish B'Av, this has been a historically a tragic day that's really kind of befallen the nation of Israel, even before they were the nation of Israel, the Jews, the Israelites, going all the way back to the times of Moses, right? So let me just read a few things, and this I'm getting this list from Rapture Ready, and it's by a guy named Jeff Van Hatten. I don't know who he is, but he does a chronological listing of all the things that have happened on Tish B'Av. So just for those who aren't savvy on the Jewish calendar, the ninth of Av is the Tish B'Av, and in our Gregorian calendar, sometimes the ninth of Av falls on in July, and sometimes it falls in August. So every year it kind of fluctuates. So last year it was in August. This year it's today and tomorrow. And then if you were to go back to 70 AD, when the siege of Jerusalem happened and the temple was destroyed, I believe that was on August 1st. So Tish B'Av, the ninth of Av, kind of goes back and forth on our Gregorian calendar between July and August, right? It kind of bounces back and forth. But let me just go through some of these real quick. And Anita, if you can keep me on time because I'll rabbit trail and stuff. Um, so the ninth of Av, 1312 BC, you have the 12 spies that are sent by Moses to observe the land of Canaan, and only Joshua and Caleb return with a positive report. The rest of them come back and they're like, "Whoa, we can't do this. There are giants there that they eat. The land eats the people." I mean, they just came back and said, "Okay, we can't do this. We can't do this." So they came back with a negative report. That happened on the ninth of Av. That was the first occurrence. Now, the next two occurrences would happen, would be probably what the ninth of Av is most remembered for, and that is on, the ninth of Av, 586 BC. This was the first temple built by King Solomon, was destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, and then the Judeans were sent into Babylonian exile. About 100,000 Jews were killed during this invasion, and the remaining tribes in the southern kingdom were exiled to Babylon and Persia. The ninth of Av, 70 AD, this was the second temple built by Ezra and Nehemiah and was destroyed by the Romans on August 4th, 70 AD. Over 2.5 million Jews died as a result of the war, famine, and disease. Over 100 million Jews were exiled to all parts of the Roman Empire. And then over 100,000 Jews were sold as slaves by Romans, were killed and tortured in the gladiatorial games and the pagan celebrations. Now, subsequent the ninth of Av, Tish B'Avs that have happened. So 71 AD, the Romans plowed Jerusalem with salt on July 25th, 71 AD. In 132 AD, the Romans crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt and destroyed the city of Beitar, killing over 100,000 Jews on July 8th, 132. The ninth of Av in 133, Turnus Rufus, who was, I believe, a Roman general, plowed the site of the temple. And then the Romans built the pagan city of I can't ever say this word, Aelia Capitolina, on the site of what was Jerusalem. The ninth of Av, 135 AD, the destruction of Simon Bar Kokhba's army on August 5th, 135 AD. The ninth of Av, 1095 AD, the first crusade was declared by Pope Urban II, and on July 20th, 1095. The Crusades brought death and destruction to thousands of Jews, totally obliterating many communities in the Rhineland in France. The ninth of Av, 1190 AD, 500 Jews died as a result of the rich storming a castle in York, England. Ninth of Av, 1290 AD, this was July 25th, 1290, Jews were forced out of England and accompanied by pogroms and confiscations of books and property. 1306 AD, so this would be July 22nd, 1306, the Jews were expelled from France again, accompanied by pogroms and a confiscation of books and property. 1492 AD, on the 9th of Av, this was August 11th, we have the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal culminated in the expulsion of the Jews from the Iberian Peninsula. Families were separated, many died by drowning, and there was massive loss of property by all. 1648, 9th of Av in 1648, July 8th, so this is July 18th, 1648. Bohdan Zenobi, I can't see the guy's last name, Kamil Niki, the leader of the Cossacks, a military class of Ukrainian Southern Russians, began the massacre of tens of thousands of Polish Jews. The massacre continued until 1651. The 9th of Av, 1914, World War I begins on August 1st in 1914. Russia also launched persecutions against the Jews in Eastern Russia on the same day. There were over 400 pogroms immediately following World War I in Hungary, Ukraine, Poland, and Russia. The 9th of Av, 1929, the Mufti Haj Amin al-Hussein stirred up riots against the Jews at the Wailing Wall, and this resulted in the Hebron massacre. 9th of Av, 1941, this is August 2nd, 1941, the SS commander Heinrich Himmler formally received approval from the Nazi Party for the final solution. 9th of Av, 1942, the mass deportation began of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto en route to Treblinka concentration camp. So that began on the eve of July 23rd, 1942. 1940, or excuse me, August 10th, 1989, so this is the 9th of Av. Iraqis walked out of talks with Kuwait and then invaded Kuwait and set fires to the oil wells. This action finally led to the Gulf War in 1992. And if you remember, I believe Saddam Hussein was launching rockets into Israel at that time. 1994, excuse me. 9th of Av, the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina was bombed, killing 86 and wounding 300 others. That was July 18th. On that same day, 21 pieces of Shoemaker Levy comet began bombarding the planet Jupiter. I don't think he's just throwing this in there for that it's a strange coincidence on this. 9th of Av, 2005, starting at midnight, August 14th, 2005, the entry and presence of Israeli citizens in the Gaza Strip is prohibited. 9th of Av, 2006, the Lebanon war breaks out. This is August 3rd. And let's see, the 9th of Av, 2012 Olympics were inaugurated in London, England on the eve of July 27th, 2012. This date marked the 40th anniversary of the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany, during which 8 Palestinian terrorists infiltrated the Munich Olympic Village and killed 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team. Anyway, so this just goes on. It just seems like 2015, and not all of these are specific. As he gets closer and closer to our time, not all of these are specific to to Israel, but they all seem very evil. So there's something about this date that seems very uh, um, satanic or Luciferian in it. So this date is long been associated with tragedy to the Jewish people, and it's celebrated, not celebrated, but it's um, memorialized, or they recognize it by a 25-hour fast. And even if the fast falls on a Sabbath, they push it a day, and then they do the fast on that next day, like the Sunday. So this is a very somber time for the Jewish people because of so many tragedies that's befallen them over this particular um, 9th of Av, right? So it begs the question, and I think something that Greg Lauer brings to the point is that there's something to this day, and I'll get to my conclusion in kinda and I in the article, I have, comments by Pablo Frassini, I have comments by Randy Nettles, and then Lee Brainerd, who also kinda chimed in on some of the thoughts on this article. We don't all agree, and I'm not even really dogmatic about this position because, really, we can't definitively know. All we know is that I mean, for me, personally, I think that if the Lord was gonna use the rapture as a means to wake up the Jewish people, this would be a perfect day. This would be like one of the best days to do it on because, hey, Bema seat, because uh, it's something that would definitely catch their attention, right? It's definitely something that would catch their attention. So let me bring out some of the points that he's making. I don't want to read the whole article because it's very long. It takes about 16 minutes just to read it straight through. But I am going to read this passage. It's from Deuteronomy 32:20 through 21. And Moses says, I will hide speaking for God, I will hide my face from them, and if I will see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faith. They have provoked me to jealousy by what is not God, and they have moved me to anger by their foolish idols. But I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation, and I will move them to anger by a foolish nation. Again, Deuteronomy 32:20 through 21. So his article is titled "A Hole with a Pattern in or Pattern with a Hole in It." And he goes through and he lists the two major or the three major events that really have come to symbolize the nature of the ninth of Av being their two biggest tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people. And the first is the first destruction, the destruction of the Solomonic temple, the temple of Solomon built, and then the second temple, that Herod's temple, that was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. So look how he goes through a ton of evidence, and I can't spend that much time to do that, but I want to just go through the points here, and I got it as round one, round two, and round three, and he breaks it down into 3 points each, right? Round one, point one, the Jews' great sin is rampant idolatry, plus failing to trust in God for their protection instead making a foolish deal with their enemies. And speaking of what will become the destruction by the Babylonians. So, point number two, the first temple is destroyed. Point three, a major round of judgment falls upon Israel via the Babylonians. Okay. So, round one, points one, two, and three. Round two, number one, the Jews' great sin is turning God's word into legalism, rejecting their promised Messiah, and having him crucified like a common criminal. Point number two, the second temple is destroyed. Point number three, a major round of judgment falls upon Israel via the Romans. Now, the siege in Jerusalem began somewhere around 68 AD. It lasted a couple of years before the Romans encircled Jerusalem, and then with the death of the emperor, the Roman armies pulled back, and then they kind of re-engaged after there was a brief um, power struggle in Rome with the year of the four emperors, and they're all trying to figure out who's going to take charge. But eventually, the Roman armies they disengaged enough that all the Christians would flee Jerusalem because they're remembering back to the Olivet Discourse, particularly in Luke's gospel, where Jesus is saying when you see these things, you need to flee, to run, and so they fled. But most of the Jewish people stayed there. So 2.5 million Jews ended up dying due to war, famine, disease, and so forth. Like I said, another 100 million or another million are sold into slavery, and then another 100,000 are captured by the Romans and used in gladiatorial games and so forth. So number one, the Jews' great sin is turning God's word into legalism. By the time Jesus came to earth in his first earthly ministry, the Pharisees dominated the politics of the day, and they had completely missed the intent of the law for the letter of the law. They only read the letter, they missed the intent, right? and they ended up rejecting their promised Messiah, and then they had him crucified like a common criminal. Their temple is destroyed, and then a series of judgments by the Romans begin to fall from 70 AD, really from 68 AD all the way up to 135 AD. And after 135 AD, after the Simon Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews were really in diaspora, like they were just scattered, right? And they would be going, suffering, traveling from nation to nation. They would go to a nation, they would begin to prosper, and then after a while, the nation would get jealous of them and kick them out, and then take all their stuff, and they'd have to start all over again. So we saw this all the way through, even up into in recent times, into Europe, when Heinrich Hitler, and all that with the Third Reich, and the final solution really um, culminated with the Nazi Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, and we see the results of that, right? Out of World War II, and out of all that tragedy came this resolve from the Jewish people that said never again. And then by 1948, they were their own nation again, right? So round three, this is the Jews' great sin, is dismissing with anger, jealousy, the salvation Christ offered them as they watched it go out to the Gentiles. So this would have been in what we would call the church age. They should have understood that they should have understood Moses' prophecy and repented, but they refused to do so. Not only that, but they will divide God's land. So point number two, he has a bunch of question marks because there is no temple, right? The temple, the first temple is destroyed, it's rebuilt, then the second temple is destroyed, and it's not rebuilt. So throughout the last 2,000 years and up until present day, there's been no temple, right? So a major round of judgment falls upon Israel via the Antichrist. So what his whole premise for this article was, there's a hole in the pattern. We see we see the Jews sin, we see the destruction of their temple, and then we see judgment fall on them. That happened the first time with the Babylonians, the destruction of the Solomon's temple, and then judgment falls on them with 70 years of captivity. The second time, they rejected their Messiah. They completely perverted the law in rejected their Messiah, and they crucified him. Their second temple is destroyed, and then judgment falls on them by the Romans for from 70 AD to 135 AD. Really, probably from like 68, 67, 68 AD is when the siege began, all the way up to 135 AD. So almost another 70 years, right? And then they go into diaspora for the next, almost 2 millennia. And then this round three is during this time period when Christ sent out the disciples there in Acts chapter 1, go forth and spread it, in the gospel, spread in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the world. The gospel flourished in the Gentile communities, but it didn't within the Jewish communities. And this is a kind of a little sidebar here, but when you read, let me pull it out here. In the Gospels in Matthew, I want to say it is Matthew 13. It's Matthew 13:8. So Jesus is giving the kingdom, the mystery parables, the mystery kingdom parables, and this is the sower and the soils. And notice in verse 8 in Matthew 13:8, he says, "But others fell on the ground," talking about these seeds, "and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear," right? But when you go to Mark's rendering of this, I believe it's Mark 4:8, if I'm not mistaken. He's doing the same parable, but notice that these numbers are all reversed. But these are the ones, I'm sorry, not Mark 4:8, it's Mark 4:20. But these are the ones sown on good ground, those who hear the word, accept it, and bear fruit, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100, some 100. So in Matthew's version, you have 100, 60, and then 30. And then Mark's version, you have 30, 60, and 100. So why are those numbers reversed like that? Is that just random, is that just, Mark and Matthew are taking literary liberties with how they want to record it? Or does the reversal mean something? And I believe that reversal means something, right? It's not a coincidence. Thank you, Tanky Bear. Nothing is random. Matthew was written with a Jewish audience in mind. In That's why the Gospel of Matthew begins the lineage, the genealogy with Abraham. It doesn't begin it with Adam. It begins it with Abraham. It presents Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the rightful heir of the throne of David. The the book is very Jewish in nature. It says a lot of Jewish things in there that aren't explained because Matthew doesn't feel like he has to explain it to a Jewish audience. I've used this example a lot of times. Um, but if I'm writing an article and I'm writing with an American audience in mind, and I use some slang that Americans understand, or maybe I'm writing it to Texans and it's something that Texans understand, um, I don't have to explain that. But if I'm writing it to another audience who I don't think is going to understand what I'm writing, I'll put in there an explanation. Hey, in parentheses, hey, this is what this really means, or this is what this feast means, or this is what this is, right? So Matthew is writing with a Jewish audience in mind, and Mark is writing with a Gentile audience in mind. And through the Holy Spirit, Matthew records it, showing that there would be a decrease in the effect of the gospel within the Jewish community. But in the Gentile community, it shows it the opposite. It shows it growing and growing and growing. And that's what we've seen over the last 2,000 years, is that as the gospel's gone out, that it has uh, been readily embraced by the Gentiles around the world, wherever it's gone to. But it's still being rejected by a lot of the Jewish communities, particularly the Orthodox Jewish communities, refuse to accept it to this day. So that is just something I wanted to point out that shows that there's these little uh, uh, nuggets, I guess. I don't know. They're little cool little things that you see in there in scripture that point to the divine authorship of how this Bible was written, right? So round three, talking about the Jews, and it goes with like their sin, the destruction of the temple, and then their judgment. So round three, speaking of the church age, the Jews' great sin is dismissing with anger and jealousy the salvation Christ offered them as they watched it go out to the Gentiles. And they should have understood Moses' prophecy and repented, but they refused to do so. Not only that, but they will divide God's land. And we've seen them do this here over the last 40 years, all the land for peace deals and I think the Abraham Accords had some kind of appeasement deals. And it every time that they do this, this is very angering to God. And not, he's obviously seen all this, he knows the end from the beginning. So this is not a surprise to him, but still, they're still doing this, thinking that they're gonna come up, finally get peace, and not realizing that every deal they make is just going to add fuel to the fire of their enemies' desire to destroy them and push them into the sea. So point number two in this round three, there is no temple, right? So who was the temple for the last 2,000 years? Well, in this article, he's making the case that as believers, that the church is the repository for the Holy Spirit. That your body is a temple. We see passages like that in Corinthians. We see this language in the New Testament showing that we are sealed by the Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. We see back in Matthew 27:51 that the Holy Spirit uh, apparently departed the temple. The temple veil was rent in two, separating the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, and there has not been any presence of the Holy Spirit, even according to the rabbinic stories. in the holy in the temple from that point forward all the way up until its destruction. So he's making the case that the church is the repository, is the temple here on earth, and that around three of point three, round three, the major round of judgment that will come, instead of it being the Babylonians and then or being the Romans, now it is going to be the Antichrist and the beast kingdom. But the church is now removed. Now, I can see that pattern in there. I know that when if you read the article, you'll see Lee puts his comments in there that you have physical temples, and then you have like a metaphysical or a symbolic temple. And so he's not seeing some consistency in there, and I totally get that. And again, that's why I'm not really dogmatic about this point. I just find it very fascinating, and I like how Greg's mind works in this and seeing this pattern, right? And seeing the hole in the pattern where if the church is removed at a Tish B'Av, not necessarily today or tomorrow, but any Tish B'Av in the coming future, that would be a major wake-up call to the Orthodox Jewish community, right? If you're in Israel and things are going well, the world's finally kind of not crazy anymore, who in the world would find a rapture? I mean, the rapture is going to be troubling in and of itself, and it's going to have all of its own issues with it. But who is going to recognize the significance of the day that it falls on if it were to fall on a Tish B'Av, on the 9th of Av? Well, the Jews would. Let's say, and I'm not calling a date, I'm just using this as a hypothetical situation. If it happened today or tomorrow, obviously it would fall on a Tish B'Av. The Orthodox Jewish communities would note the significance to this, and something would click in their minds like, oh, this means something. God is doing something. If it were to happen in 2024, that would be August 12th or 13th or through 13th. 2025 is August 2 through the 2nd through the 3rd. July 26 or 2026 it'd be July 22nd through the 23rd. 2027 would be August 11th through the 12th. 2028 July 31st through August 1st. So it's on and on, right? There's if it were to fall on any of these future dates, it would mean something to the Jewish people. Particularly the Orthodox communities would recognize the significance that God's hand was in this somehow, because now all of these Christians who were really there, maybe not so much today because of the way the church has gone, but in years past, we've been one of their greatest allies. We've been very big supporters of Jewish charities, of the Jewish right to exist in their land, and so forth. So this is why I don't, going back to 2011, all the articles I've written in you know things I've participated in, I never got hyped up about the blood moons. I never got hyped up about 2011. I never got hyped up about 2012, 2017. I didn't get hyped up on any of those days. But something about this, it intrigues me to think that if the rapture happened in a way, it would be done in a way that meant something for Israel, because now God's turning his focus back to the nation of Israel. So that's where I see the significance with the rapture on a Tish B'Av, as opposed to the rapture on Pentecost, or I don't associate normally the rapture with any other Jewish feast date. I know some of my brothers and sisters on here do, and that's okay. That's not, it's going to happen when it happens, right? But like, I think that just me personally, I happen to like very much the Tish B'Av angle to it, because I see this as a wake up call to the nation of Israel. Okay, so with that said, go to the article, read it, and by all means, shoot me a message, or comment on the article if there's still things that you have questions about, or want to discuss. I will talk about them up until July 7th. Beyond July 7th, I will be out of the net for a couple of weeks, and then I'll be returning in the end of July with, I think I'm getting on with, I want to say Pablo. Me and Pablo are going to do something. So Thank you guys for being on. I do have time for a few questions. And Anita says there's no question. That's awesome. Oh. Okay. So I know what I got to do. Hold on. So Karen from Tennessee mailed me a letter, and she was asking about the 10 kings. So I wanted to talk about the 10 kings very quickly. And so this podcast is kind of all over the place tonight. So on my website, in the charts, if you go to the tabs at the top, if you go to the actual website, not the app, if you go to the website, go to the tab that says charts, and you go down. I created a chart with an alternative view of the kings, the 10 kings, and I want to just go through that real quickly. I've linked it below here. I think hopefully you guys should be able to see that. Um, Now, I am, again, I'm not dogmatic on this position either, because I don't we're none of us are gonna be here to see this necessarily. Um, we're not gonna see it come to its full fruition. We may see some of this come about, and I know, like, guys like Ty Green believe that we'll see this, and maybe we will. I'm not dogmatic on this position. But I did a chart based off of Gary Stearman's position that that the 10 kings. Let me just go through his real quick. There were the 7 heads and the 10 crowns. For him, the 7 heads were the 7 stages of the Roman Empire, going from when Rome was founded in 753 BC to the Tarquins, the counselors, the dictators, the republicans, the triumvirate. And then you get from 27 BC, kind of going forward, you have Roman imperialism. This is where the emperors are taking over. And then below that, I have the statue, the multi-metallic statue showing the legs and the feet of iron and clay. And then, at some future point, we're going to see the Antichrist rise up. Now, I think part of his argument, and then a lot of other people's arguments, is that the Roman Empire, even though the Western leg, which was where Rome was, um, ultimately collapsed in around 430 BC, and or 430 AD, excuse me, and was conquered by the barbarians, and you had all these different barbarian tribes coming in and kind of just sacking the city, so forth. The eastern leg, which was Constantinople, went on for another 1,000 years, and ultimately they were destroyed by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Turks were the rising power at the time. They took over Constantinople, which is now today Istanbul. Um, but at that time, even though the Ottomans rose to power, you had Europe back, and you had various European powers that were coming. Would rise for a while, and then they'd kind of fade. You had the Spanish would rise, then you had the English, and then the French, and then everybody was kind of just like you're in power for a little bit, and then not. And then later we see, France, obviously, with Napoleon Bonaparte, conquered most of Europe. They dominated for a while, for a short period of time, and then the Germans kind of rose up. So the Roman Empire, in the Western leg at least, was kind of constantly in flux, but it was always there in some form, right? And we see in 1950, really 1951, the beginning of what is today the European Union. It was called the European Common Market, and I believe it was Germany, the Benelux countries, and France, if I'm not mistaken. And they formed this kind of the European coal and steel community, and then from there they began to do all these treaties every few years, and eventually more and more countries began to join this, and we have what we have today, which is the European Union, right? So the Roman Empire never really died. It was always kind of just, changing and morphing, right? And then out of this is where the Antichrist rises from that. So he comes from out of the 7, or excuse me, there's 10 kings in this here. He comes in as the 11th, and he subdues 3. And when he does that, he becomes the 8th. So now there's 8 kings, and he rises up and kind of takes over everything. And if you can look at the chart, you'll see what I'm talking about. have an arrow pointing up to where he's kind of elevated above to where the 8 stages of the Roman Empire is now he is now the personification of the beast kingdom. And I liken this idea that the beast is both the man, the Antichrist, as well as the kingdom. And the way I look at this is that I look at it something like Adolf Hitler was a man who was the head of the National Socialist Party there in Germany in the 20s and 30s, and then the 40s. And he came to personify the Third Reich. When you thought of the Third Reich, you thought of Adolf Hitler. Very much the same way with this Antichrist. He is going to personify the beast kingdom, whatever this kingdom ends up becoming, right? All right. So that's kind of based off Gary Stearman's perspective of this. And I thought of an alternative one, and I was listening to Jack Hibbs one day, and it wasn't he wasn't teaching this. It was just something that he said that sparked my thoughts on this. And if you go down to my charts and you keep going down a little bit, you'll see the um, the 7 letters to the 7 churches chart. You'll see the God the Father, the Trinity's relationship to the temples, which is also kind of tied with the ninth Vav. You'll see the 70th week. And then below that, you'll see I think it's the bottom one. It says the 7 heads, it's 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns. So what I was thinking with this, and it's an alternative view, and again, I'm not dogmatic about it, and I'm not even sold on it myself 100%. I just think it's interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it. Is you have the 7 heads, the 10 horns, and then the 10 crowns. The 7 heads, and I believe in the Greek, you can look at that as authorities. So 7 authorities. You have 10 horns, which is like this imperial confederacy, because we know, according to Revelation 13 and Revelation 17, that these 10 kings are 10 rulers, right? And then the 10 crowns are the 10 rulers. They rule with one mind. So the 10 horns would be possibly 10 regions of the world or 10 sections of the world. And then the 7 heads are 7 authorities. So what are those authorities, right? Looking at the way the world is broken up today, even in the United States and in American politics, we've created this position of czar. He's the economic czar, or she's the health czar, or so and so is the COVID czar, whatever. We give this kind of informal title czar to somebody that is supposed to be heading up a task force or the subject matter expert for something, right? So, what if these authorities are um, things, right? What if these are sections of the economy of the world system? So, number one, I have the political is the number one authority, and that's based on the Ministry of Truth and then the White Horse, right? Think about the 4 horsemen. Number two would be the tech czar, and then you have like the military czar, the economic czar, the health czar, the agriculture czar, and then the religious czar, right? If these authorities are subjects, right? If they're things, just like today, we're really kind of hyper focused on sustainable development goals, right? We're hyper, not we, but the world is focused on equality, equity, clean water. There's 17 different sustainable development goals that the United Nations has, and they're all broken up into topics. They're broken up into to subjects, to different things, right? So what if these authorities are those things? So the 7 heads are 7 authorities, but also seem to indicate they rule from a particular geographic location where also the woman, who is the harlot, has her power. Maybe that's Rome, maybe that's a newly rebuilt Babylon, maybe it's the Saudi Arabian city of Neom. We don't know. We don't know where this city is going to ultimately be. We suspect that at some point Jerusalem will house the Antichrist kingdom, because he's gonna set up shop there, at least partially, because then the armies of the east come to march against him there, right? But that's the first point. that these 7 heads are 7 authorities. They govern over different subjects like, agriculture, religion, technology, the economy, health, military operations, and then the political one is the one I think where the Antichrist comes in. So, why do I have in here number 2, point number 2, before and as the seals are being opened, so as Christ is in heaven, he takes the scroll from the right hand of the Father. He's the only one that can do this, and he begins to open these seals. What comes out first are these first 4 horsemen, right? So seal 1 opens, and then this white horse is unleashed on the earth, who we believe to be the Antichrist. And if these are released, and they seem to be in response to some crisis on the earth, right? So in the order of precedence to deal with they're open in the order of precedence to deal with the crisis, beginning with the rapture crisis. And the rapture will be a crisis apart from the plane crashes, the missing people not, paying into the system anymore. You're not paying your mortgage, you're not showing up for work, et cetera, missing children. The government that begins to form here is going to try and control the narrative. They're going to want to control the narrative, right? Because Satan is now empowering this governmental system. He doesn't want people to think it's the rapture. He wants people to think it's UFOs or whatever. But there's a need here to control it, to control the narrative. So that's why I put this ministry of truth. I don't know if it's going to be called the ministry of truth. I just put that there as a title to hold, name place there for it. But out of that comes the white horse, right? As he is beginning to cement his authority upon the earth, we know that the Antichrist, as he comes out of the old Roman Empire system, there are other nations out there that don't want to fall in line. They don't want to be a part of this. And not just nations, but people groups and criminal groups. The organized crime, cartels. There's going to be a lot of different groups that don't want any part of this new, rising global system, and they're going to fight this. And this is where I believe the red horse is unleashed. So then this creates the office of the military czar, or, the joint chiefs of staff, whatever you want to call it, a new Pentagon kind of place. And this guy is now put in charge of wrangling all of these rebellious groups out here, and hundreds of thousands are going to die during this process, right? And then you have the tech czar, right? You have somebody that's trying to, okay, we're going to control all the world. Now we need to control how this information comes in to us. How do we manage the information processing that has to happen for billions of people all around the world? And I believe this is where the false prophet comes in. I don't think he's initially tied in with the religion part. Just look at Noah Yuval Harari. Look how much interest this guy, he's not a theologian, he is not a priest, he's not a pope, he's not anything. Look how fixated he is on religion, right? Look how fixated he is on rewriting the Bible, or really kind of slamming Christianity, or Judeo-Christian values. I don't know that the false prophet, and the Bible doesn't tell us necessarily. We know that he comes out of the land, which we believe to be Israel in the symbology there in Revelation 13, but we don't see how he rises in Revelation 6. If he comes in part with the white horse, or if he's, we don't see where he comes into the picture. We just see that he comes in afterwards in Revelation 13. The political thing rises up, and then he shows up. So I think that somehow he's tied in with technology in a way. And I'm not saying that it's Harari, and I'm not saying that it's Elon Musk or anybody else. I'm just saying he seems to come from an unorthodox place and uses his intellect to do things like create the mark of the beast, to create the image of the beast, and to give it life and so forth. And we know that Satan will empower this thing, and there's going to be some supernatural aspects to it, but he seems to use his knowledge of technology and then infuse that with religion, very much the way that Harari does. And again, I'm not saying that it's Harari. I'm just saying that Harari seems very fixated on religion, especially Christianity or Judeo-Christian worldview. Um, so these seals are opened, and they seem that even though Christ is he's the one that's opening these seals on the earth, they're being unleashed. He's opening them in heaven, and they're coming out on the earth and happening on the earth, right? They're allowed to go forth on the earth. And from the earthly perspective, they seem to be necessary to handle the crises that are coming. Ultimately, we see with the economic czar um, that the all of this war and fighting and conflict is terrible for the economy. It crashes the economy on top of what the rapture's already done. It seems to be there's a little gap in time before um, the arrival of the white horse and the stability of the beast kingdom with this mark of the beast system. There seems to be a little bit of point in time where there's going to be some real economic hardships going on. And then we see in the pale horse, and again, these are just alternative ways to look at this. The health czar. What if the health czar is created? That office is created to because a pandemic or something has come forth, and now it's wiping out. And we know by the time the pale horse comes, that a fourth of the population of the world is going to be dead at this point. So if going off today's standards, we're at 8 billion people and plus change, we're looking at around 2 billion people that are going to be dead in a very, very short period of time, right? So going down, you have the 10 horns. So these the czars are over some parts of the beast kingdom. If you go down, you're going to look at how they decide to divide the world up into these regions, and these regions will have their leaders, their political leaders over them, right? So you have the regional, the confederacy of these 10 regions. That's what will result in all this. And then in each of those regions, somebody's going to be put in charge of those regions. Somebody's going to have the rose pinned on them to say, "Hey, you're in charge. You're going to take care of this." They might serve as governors. The Bible calls them kings, and maybe that's what the title that they're given at this point. But the kings fall underneath these authorities, right? And then underneath them, obviously, you have the kings. So I have here in number 3. So certain offices work together. For example, the technology, economic, and religious czars create this biometric currency that forces everyone into the beast system. So these czars come together, they bring their minds together in their offices and their staff. They say, hey, how do we get everybody on the planet on board and doing what we want them to do? And they come up with the mark of the beast system. We know today that we both have the technology, we're almost there with the currency and the infrastructure to implement some kind of global system. We're not 100% there yet, but we're pretty close, right? So these authorities come together and they come up with some plan, and it ends up becoming what we know as the mark of the beast. Now, there at this point on the earth, there's going to be people that come to faith after the rapture. They're going to know what happened because people like us are always talking about the rapture and stuff. But they are going to be martyred in the fifth seal judgment to a great degree. But there is now a large number of people who are not going to know anything about the mark of the beast, and they're going to be given over to this great delusion, right? They're going to be given over to this idea that this is really great. This is supposed to be the way this is perfect. This is the perfect answer, perfect solution for all this. So now, point number 4. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, so he's swift like ancient Greece. His feet were like the feet of a bear, so he's going to be brutal like the ancient Persians, and his mouth will be like the mouth of a lion. He's going to be powerful like the Babylonians. And together they form this hybrid, and they're going to take basically the best of all of these ancient powers, and they're going to put them together into the system, and people are going to be blown away at how powerful they are. Nobody's going to be able to stand against them, the system, the beast. Number 5, the little horn. So it seems like out of these kings, these like regional kings, the little horn subdues or conquers 3 kings, and then he takes over the rest by having the majority, and then he ascends to the title of King of Kings as he ascends to the 8th horn, right? So He comes up and he ends up taking over and becoming this eighth horn, and now he both he both is he is the 11th, but by subduing the three, he becomes the eighth. Now the three are out of the equation, and now he has the majority rule over everybody. Number six, the 10 kings are the 10 toes of Daniel 2 statue. They co-rule the regions of the world, thinking they share power, thinking they are sharing in the power. The Antichrist rises as an 11th, the little horn. It could be the region that he hails from, and then subdues three, then ascends to the highest office as a global emperor, aided by the false prophet. And then number seven, the beast system that was and is not is himself. Now, I put in here in parentheses, he now personifies the beast system, is also the eighth, and is of the seven heads, and is going to perdition. He is going straight to the lake of fire. And this is something that gets missed a lot with regard to the false prophet and the Antichrist. They don't go to the great white throne judgment. They are tossed alive headfirst into the lake of fire, 1,000 years ahead of everybody else. They're there 1,000 years ahead of everybody else. That is that is horrific. Um, anyways, at his resurrection, he becomes Satan incarnate, who will at the end be cast into the bottomless pit. But again, so this is an alternative view for how this passage reads. So the beast that was and is not himself is also the eighth and is of the seven and is going to perdition. He becomes Satan incarnate at the midpoint. So something happens where he's either assassinated or somebody shoots him or something, and he is cast. Or we know that the Satan now cast out of heaven is confined to the earth. He is no longer able to travel the dimensions, travel to the heavenly domains, or anything. He is confined to this physical domain, and so he possesses the man Antichrist, and he becomes basically Satan incarnate in this man. So we know the only other man in Bible history, in the Bible that we know of, in history in general, was the only other person called the son of perdition was Judas Iscariot, right? And Judas Iscariot allowed Satan to possess him, who then turned Jesus in and had him killed and arrested and all that for 30 pieces of silver. So Satan, here's the part of it that gets a little confusing, and this is why I'm trying to make sense of it. Let me go to it real quick. Revelation 17. Get it real quick. Okay, verse 11, it says, well, let me start in verse 10. There are also seven kings, five have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. And the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, is going to perdition. There is well, there is a passage here. Let me find it, where he ascends. Anyways, the beast that ascends, I think, happens to speak of Satan. Think about during the millennial kingdom, Satan is so the Antichrist and the false prophet are tossed alive into the lake of fire. Well, Satan is still confined to the earth. He is chained up by Michael, the archangel, and bound, and then he is tossed into the bottomless pit. Now, we know that he's kept in the bottomless pit, which, if you think back to like Chuck Missler's teachings on the subject, um, Chuck had a he thought it might be a circle, like this the bottomless pit is actually a circle because circle has no bottom to it, right? Every direction is up. So, it may be something like that or just something that we have no comprehension of how, the physics of it, but at the end of the millennium, he is allowed to come out of that pit. He ascends out of that pit and comes back to the earth for a short season, and then he is allowed to we don't know how long the short season is. It could be a couple of years. I mean, we don't know. It could be 6 months. The Bible doesn't specify what the short season is, but it's enough time for him to gather millions and millions and millions of people that are born inside of the millennial kingdom time frame, that 1,000 years, that they're still in their physical bodies, and at some point during this the reign of Christ on the earth, they begin to resent this rule, and they're still in their sin natures, and they follow Satan, and then they come against Jerusalem, and God just destroys them like that with fire, and boom, that's it. And then from there, it goes into the great white throne judgment, the great dead and small, and I believe these are the unbelievers of all time, from Cain all the way forward, and then those who are in the millennial kingdom, those rebellious ones, right? They're going to be judged at the great white throne judgment. They're going to be not found in the Lamb's book of life, and they're going to be cast into the lake of fire. So they're going to be cast into the lake of fire, where the Antichrist and the false prophet have already been there for 1,000 years at this point. And then Satan and then the fallen angels and all the rest of the wicked will be put in there, as well as death and hell. So that is my take on the 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. I presented 2 different perspectives of it. Obviously, there's more perspectives than just these two. Um, these are the two that I kind of like. I don't know, and I think, frankly, that we're not going to really totally understand these things, and we're going to be watching these from the mezzanine. We're going to be watching this from heaven unfold. So at that point, we're like, oh man, you know, Chuck Missler was right, or whoever, somebody had it. Somebody has the right view of this. We don't know who that person is yet. All right, so let me answer a few questions. And sorry, guys, I've missed all of the comments on here. Um, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight again. Just man, you guys are awesome. Again, I'm gonna do this next Monday. I'll be off for a couple weeks, but then every Monday I'm gonna try and keep the Monday Night Lives going. And the reason I do Monday Night Lives, aside from the fact that I asked you, the audience, hey, what night would work good, is I try and deconflict with Tyler, Chooch, Barry, Pablo, Lee, and everybody else, which is hard to do at times. But also because I normally don't work Mondays, so I'm off Monday, and then I work usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and then or Tuesday through Friday. So, but I also wanted to remind everybody before we go, if you can get on Discord, Thursday nights, we do a live video chat together. So I can see you, you can see me, we can all talk and interact. There's no real script. It's not, I'm not going through the Bible or anything on there. We're just kind of just talking, hanging out. I believe it's capped at 25. So if you can't get in right away, just keep trying. And hats off to Cavalier for getting that all put together for me and his daughter. They set all that up. I'm not that smart. So we figured out how to do like the little Zoom meetings in there. So that's what that Thursday night Discord meeting is on. And it should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 o'clock and 8 p.m. Central. 8 p.m. Yeah, we can probably shoot for 8 p.m. Central, which is 9 p.m. Eastern for me. So okay, let me get to these questions. Let me pull them up here real quick. Okay, Becky, question: what do you think about the whole Russia situation? Man, this has been a very fascinating weekend. I talked a little bit about it in Sunday school this past Sunday. Before I really even understood what was happening, I knew there was some kind of a coup going on between the Wagner Group and Prigozhin and against Putin. The one thing I knew, and I think that it absolutely is held true from then till now, is the fact that we see Russia in the battle of Gog and Magog. We see them in Ezekiel 38 and 39. They are major players in this conflict that has never, this war has not happened yet. It's never happened. So we know that it's still future. So um, whatever was going to come out of this, I knew Russia was still going to be standing at the end of this. I didn't know if Putin himself would be standing, but I knew that Russia, as a military force and a threat against Israel, would still be standing. So, there's a lot of speculation on this. I think the Pentagon had said that they had misplaced $6 billion, and then they found it, and then all of a sudden, this Wagner guy seems to have $6 billion. It seems like the Western powers were maybe bribing him um, to turn against Putin, and in so doing, they promised him everything. They promised him, "Hey, we'll let you lead Russia. We'll let you. You can have the $6 billion. You can blah 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 blah." And he made it through some town, and I can't pronounce the name of the town, but Amir was talking about this, and this town is where they store a lot of nukes, tactical nukes. So this Wagner group may have, or a small group of them may have accustomed some tactical nukes that may have kind of brought everything to a standstill. Putin may have threatened the group as they were driving their columns up towards Moscow. He could have said, "Hey, I'm going to nuke you. You go one more mile, and I'm nuking you guys. I'm not playing around." It could have been that. I mean, there's so many different things that this could be, and honestly, none of us. I would even venture to say, I would say 99.9% of Western media, Western intelligence knows what's really going on, unless we're the ones bribing Prigozhin to lead his Wagner group against Putin. If that's the case, then obviously there's a big scandal behind this. But either way, I think it's getting scary to the point now where um, Putin keeps saying things like, we will use whatever means necessary to protect our nation and the existence of our nation. And I think he's kind of implying this idea that he's not afraid to go the full Monty with everybody with nukes. So that's what I think. Michael Baker, do you think BRICS will become the 10 kings? You know, the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then they have other nations I think that are joining or have joined. Saudi Arabia, I think France is interested in joining. It very well could be. It very well could be something to that effect, or it could be like the D10. We had the G7 for a long time, and then the G7, within there was a creation of the D10, and there's a whole bunch of geopolitical alliances around the world right now that are fascinating. Aside from NATO and aside from some of the major ones, but you have CANZAC, which is Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and I believe the United States forms some kind of a military alliance, separate alliance. I mean, there's just so many. Honestly, I think the Rapture is going to shake everything up in a way that we probably can't even foresee right now. But here's what we do know: we do know that there's a propensity for leaders in the world, military in particular, who love to organize the world into sections. The Army does this. The U.S. military does this. We have Army North, Army South, CENTCOM, PACOM, AFRICOM, EUCOM. We love the Club of Rome did this. The Club of Rome broke the world into 10 regions. So we know that this idea of breaking the world into regions is not new. It's something that they're always kind of playing around with these ideas of how to do this. So I do think that the rapture is what is going to present the world the perfect crisis that will see the collapse of the United States. And then as the US collapses, it creates this massive vacuum of power, both military and economic power, that other nations and regions will seek to fill this gap, this vacuum, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. And then that's where this region, whatever it comes out to be, will begin to formalize, right? And out of that, what I mentioned earlier, this like ministry of truth is going to try and get a wrangle on the narrative of what happened, where all these missing people go, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just how I see it. Again, I mean, I don't know 100%. That's just how my mind thinks about this. Okay. If we have relatives that Ren asked, if we have relatives that are where that were cremated, how will their ashes affect the resurrection? I don't think it will affect it at all. If I died, I would be cremated, and my father was cremated back in January. Um, I don't think it's a challenge to God at all. Think about the people that have died at sea, and their bodies are eaten by fish and then digested, and then their remains are scattered over the bottom of the ocean. And we're just talking about their physical bodies, right? Or bodies that are buried that just the earth, they ashes to ashes, dust to dust. They just go back to dirt. Worms and everything else have their way with the bodies, carcasses, vultures, so on and so forth. I don't think it's anything at all for God to just boom in an instant bring everybody back to not just the bodies they had, but to their perfect glorified bodies that they were always intended to have. And these are the bodies that we'll have throughout eternity. And we will have to have glorified immortal bodies in order to be where God is, in order to be able to do the things that God is going to have us do, to rule over, to help him co-rule the millennial kingdom. The earth is going to be restored. All the places in the world that are currently uninhabitable, that you can't live in, like the Antarctic, the Sahara Desert. I mean, there's just tons of places that are really just hostile to human life. Those are going to be fertile farmlands, and just, I mean, it's just going to be completely restored, and the world will have a population like it's never seen before. The world's greatest population will be during the millennial kingdom. So we will have to be resurrected, or translated, and those that have already died and are with the Lord in their spirit will come back, and they will get their glorified bodies as well. And God will be able to reconstitute those bodies in a moment, in the blink of an eye. Okay. And Annette asked, question: would you pray that the Lord Jesus put in hearts the courage to tell our unsaved loved ones more time about Jesus, that their hearts would be open to receive them? Absolutely. Lord, let's just pray right now. Lord, we just come before you, and we just humbly ask for your strength, your boldness, Lord, to go forth and share the gospel with our unsaved friends, coworkers, loved ones, Lord, that we might not only have the boldness, but we will have the opportunity, Lord, that you will present those open doors and those opportunities for us to share the gospel. Um, and that those that are listening might have eyes to see and ears to hear and hearts to receive the message, Lord, that they might be saved. And at the very least, Lord, if they won't accept the message at that moment in time, Lord, we pray that we are able to plant seeds, Lord, that will bear fruit down the road. And we just thank you for all these things. And we thank you for the gift of being able to share the gospel, Lord. We thank you for that. That is a wonderful opportunity. And I pray that we each are, myself included, become emboldened to share the gospel with those who don't know you, Lord. And it's in your son's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay. Tiffany asked, question: do you think that the toes mixed with iron and clay could be communist nations and democratic nations? The Iron Curtain of communism comes to mind. I don't think that it is. I think maybe at one point in time I maybe thought it was, but I think when the beast kingdom comes, it's gonna be totalitarian. All of it's gonna be totalitarian. I think Tom Hughes and I, a while back, talked about this, and it may have something to do with mixing technology in with the human body. We see the way the world's going now, the Internet of Things, the Internet of military things, the Internet of, we see where the Internet's going. They're trying to get the Internet in the computer systems into the human body. That seems to make sense to me. It could be something along the lines of some now new genetic corruption, along the lines of like the Nephilim, like trying to create. I'm not saying what we saw in the last couple of years was um, turning people into Nephilim. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in the future, some of this stuff that we've seen the last few years, maybe laying the groundwork for what's going to come in the future. But maybe it has something to do with that. We don't really know, but I don't necessarily think that it's communism and democratic nations. I think at that point in time, every nation is going to be ruled. It's going to be a totalitarian state at that point. You're either part of the system or they're going to kill you. So um, feral Harrell, feral Harrell. Question: Since Daniel describes the 10 kings as iron mixed with clay mingles seed, do you think it is possible the 10 kings will be represented by some sort of synthetic biology? Yeah, these guys may have, what interestingly, Elon Musk said that in his Neuralink, Britt Gillette's talked about this a lot, but the Neuralink, they drill through the skull and they embed this technology into the brain. Synchron, which is his competitor for this, they use the artery and they inject nanotechnology, nanobots or whatever into the artery, and that goes into the brain. That goes into the brain and embeds into the brain that way through the artery, so it's less invasive. But you know, Elon was pitching this to the FDA and to the health and to the world, saying that we could restore sight to the blind, we can help the lame to walk, we can all the medical benefits for doing this. And, people are like, right on, that's awesome. Well, let's do it. And then he said he would get it, you know, that even whenever it gets to whatever stage of approval and gets to whatever acceptable level, that he's going to get it done. And he's not blind and he's not crippled and he wants it done because he wants the benefits of that. He wants to be connected to the internet. He wants to be able to have however high his IQ is now, it'll like triple it, quadruple his IQ when this happens, if this works out according to like, how they plan to do this. So, um, by this point, and I say, even if this is next year, things are moving so rapidly that think about it this way. Technology, when you look back at the industrial revolutions, the four industrial revolutions, there'll be an invention that happens and then things will kind of go up like this, right? Boom, they'll make, back in the first industrial revolution, they'll create these machinery that will help them like loom and sew things together and do things like that. uh what do they call it, a looming wheel or whatever, things that help make blankets and whatever. But instead of having to do it by hand, now this machine would do it, right? And there's this spike in growth and how this advances. Now they begin to improve upon this machine, but this only goes to a point and then it plateaus, right? And then it plateaus until something way down the road happens, and then this goes up again. We see this with the automobile, with the planes. We see this with every level of technology. Things will go and go and go until a point, and then eventually it'll plateau until some new thing is created, and then that thing will take off. And I think that where we are today, things are going to plateau with smart technology to a point. And but immediately after the rapture, one of the things that is going to happen is that the um the restrainer, not only is the restrainer removing his ministry of restraint from the earth against wickedness, but also against man's ambitions and man's ability to advance. I think God has kept man at bay and allowed man to progress slowly over time so that this timeline would play out. I mean, because man, if Satan is in the world trying to help man create weapons of mass destruction and do all this stuff, he would have had the Romans, making nuclear bombs if he could have. But technology being what it was, he's allowed mankind to slowly progress over time. And every once in a while, you'll have a guy here and a guy there, or a woman here or a woman there that they seem to be able to use their entire brain, or they're just crazy smart, and they advance things leaps and bounds. They discover something, Isaac Newton, Leonardo da Vinci, and Copernicus, and just they look at things a different way, and that's where it unlocks this level, and then it lets all these other people race out. And I don't know if Tim is still on here. Uh, Timothy Gaines, is he still here? But the probably the best example I could think of, and it is not necessarily it's a like example, right? But uh, think about a popular band that comes out. Let's say Bon Jovi, right? Most people know that when Bon Jovi came out in, I think, '85, when he made it really big. Before Bon Jovi, there wasn't a lot of bands like Bon Jovi, but after Bon Jovi made it big and became a thing, then you had thousands of these other bands that were they all look like Bon Jovi, all sounded like Bon Jovi, and they just kinda rode that wave, right? And then that goes until, like, yeah, like the Beatles or really any popular band, right? And then that goes until, say, like Guns N' Roses, and then you have a bunch of bands that look like Guns N' Roses, and then that goes to like Nirvana. Then you have a bunch of bands like Nirvana. That's how this wave of technology goes, right? You create one smartphone, they might have a what do they call that? You have a 10-year patent on it, and you can have the technology for 10 years or something. But other bands were or other not bands, other technologies like Androids and other things will start coming out that are a little bit different, so they can say, "Hey, we're not the iPhone." And they'll go and they'll go and they'll go, but then eventually they all kind of plateau because they're limited by the technology of their day. But then some new technology will come out and somebody will connect the dots and they're like, "Oh, well, let's do this and add this to this thing." And boom, this thing goes into this new direction and it takes off, right? I think that's the way that this technology is gonna be, and it's gonna be held at bay until the rapture, then immediately after the rapture, aside from all the chaos, aside from the craziness that's gonna happen, there are gonna be rapid advances in technology, and that's gonna enable the beast kingdom to really solidify their control over the earth. Okay, Steel Magnolia asks, and this is the last question: "If the Antichrist is the 11th horn, then the 10 kings must rise first." And yeah, I agree. Another reason why the rider on the white horse might bring in the beast system and not the beast himself. I absolutely agree with that. Um, Aquanet ozone depletion, yeah. Uh, I Side note, I woke up the other morning and my hair was like I had this perfect, like, '80s pompadour fondue, like, this crazy, like, hair was I had to take a picture of it. It was just crazy. It never had that happen. Um But yeah, so the 10 kings have to rise up first in order for there to be an 11th. I think Ty Green talks about this quite a bit, and he thinks that we may see the 10 kings prior to the rapture. And I don't disagree with that. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see them or not, if we'll even recognize them. They might be alive. I mean, they're alive today, but we might see them come together and say, "Hey, we're going to form a global network of 10 leaders in it or whatever. Maybe this is something that the Bilderbergers discuss every year in secret or the World Economic Forum. We just don't know because we're not there behind the scenes with them. I did see one other question that I do want to address, and that will be the official last one. It was something about the Nephilim, and I can't remember who asked that or even where that is. Hmm. I'm sorry, guys. I thought I saw this somewhere. Yeah, I don't see it. Okay. If you have that question again, you can shoot it to me real quick. Something to do with the Nephilim. Anyways. Okay. Well, again, thank you guys for being here tonight. I'm gonna cut it short here. And I believe Tyler is on. Um, I'm not mistaken. Tyler might be on. Yeah, thank you to all the mods, Michael, Anita, Bima, and you guys really just you make it so that I don't have to stress about the chat room because it's so hard to talk through the topics and then keep looking at the chat because then I get distracted all the time. I get distracted enough as it is. I don't, looking at the chat just makes me even more distracted. So thank you guys, and then kind of policing everything up, and then getting the questions for me. So yes, thank you guys, much appreciated. And just keep praying. My job here, there's a lot of craziness going to happen. I'm going home in July, going to go on vacation, but while I'm gone, there's going to be a lot of moving parts and pieces to where I am here in Kentucky. I I've sent my boss's boss um some options for me, and hopefully they work with me on some of this stuff. And if they don't, then I could always just I guess I could, say, "Hey, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm gonna leave." And I don't know if that looks bad or not. But oh, here it is. Here it is. Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. But yeah, keep praying that I can get this job back in Texas. I'd like to do it legitimately and just have something there, and boom, I can go into this because there's a lot of hurting communities in Texas, especially with the tornadoes. And the tornadoes are not just the only thing. I mean, there's always crazy weather happening in Texas because Texas, you've got the weather fronts that come from the northwest. You have the weather that comes from the Gulf. You have, I mean, Texas is just like the perfect spot for all this chaotic weather, and that's why you have Tornado Alley, just that whole area up there, up the Midwest. It's the meeting point for all these different weather fronts, and that's why there's always like tornadoes and things, crazy stuff. And then we have hurricane season coming up. Okay, Nancy, let's see. Oh man, where did it go? Where did it go? Here it is. It was this question: if Noah lived amongst the Nephilim before God wiped out mankind, will we also live amongst aliens, aka demons, before the rapture? Oh, that is very interesting. I remember seeing this and I was like, I got to answer that question later. Um, who's to say we're not already and we just don't know about it? I know a lot of people, Ellie Marzulli and Timothy Alberino, and there's a whole bunch of people that believe that the U.S. is actively working with aliens, and that this guy, this whistleblower that just came out recently, Gresh, I think is his name. He said something to the effect that we have a lot of their spaceship, and we even have a lot of these aliens, bodies, and I think one of them was supposed to be alive for so many years. Um, you know, all that stuff is kept, Umbra to, top level classified. We're not going to understand or know about this stuff unless we see disclosure happen at a really significant level. So yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely possible that they could be here already and kind of aiding and guiding mankind, the elite along certain paths. So, but I don't. Again, I don't think that the Nephilim that were like in Noah's day are is what Satan is going to use this time around. And the example I used before with like the Kandahar giant, in ancient times when you're fighting with swords and spears, if you're a giant, you have an obvious advantage, right? You have an obvious advantage against people fighting against you with swords and spears. But nowadays, with machine guns, drones, with tactical nukes, and the modern warfare that we have, being a giant is a liability. It's not a good thing because you're just a bigger target to kill. I could kill a giant with a M4 500 feet away. I don't have to be right up next to him. I can just shoot him from a distance. Um, but I do think that they will try and go the route of super soldiers, via like Captain America type guys. Augmented humans is kind of where I think that they want to go with this. So anyways, that's thank you for that question. Um, yeah, Becky, I watched Independence Day, the original one. I just watched it a couple weeks ago. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. I don't even remember the last time I watched it, but it was just funny to watch it again. Okay, guys. Man, it's so good to hang out with you tonight. Again, Thursday night we'll be doing the kind of the Zoom meeting on Discord if you want to get on there and face to face and just chat. YouTube is great, but it's always kind of very one directional. I'm just kind of talking and I see a little bit of talking on the chat, but in the Zoom meeting we can actually kind of talk face to face and I get to learn who you are, things about you, where you're at. And so we'll try and make that work. Let's shoot for around 8 o'clock on the Discord. Um, and Discord is definitely not the easiest system to get onto. I can just tell you that once you sign up for it, you just look for Rev 310 and we'll be on there. Well, shoot me a message. I can try and send you the link to it or whatever. I have the link posted on the website, Telegram. It's pinned to my Telegram, and I have it on the last video I did. It's pinned to that as well. So 8 Central, yes, Lynette. And don't Lynette, do not run out like you did last time. She popped in there for a second and she realized, oh, I'm on the video. And then she like disappears. So we will we will see you guys then. All right, take care. I think Tyler's on. Y'all enjoy Tyler, and we'll talk to you again soon. God bless.